Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for making time on busy Saturday today on a long weekend to be here with us. We are truly honored to have two amazing personalities. Three amazing personalities. Aamir Ibrahim, who's the CEO of Jazz, is flown here from Pakistan. We'll have a robust conversation with him. We have Zayd. He's the newest unicorn founder in the Valley. His firm just did a Series C at a 1.6 billion valuation. So we'll get to hear a little bit from Zayd as well. And our awesome moderator, Asif. Asif is with ThoughtTrace, Thomson Reuters company. So Asif has been very gracious to bring both of these amazing speakers to us today, and we'll be moderating the Fireside chat. Before we get started, I have to do this segment, so bear with me, please. A little bit about Open Silicon Valley. Let's see if this works. Yeah. So many people don't know, we have been in the Bay Area since 2001. We are a nonprofit. Open stands for Organization of Pakistani Entrepreneurs and Professionals. We have been helping entrepreneurs and professionals since 2001, help them build their startups, and also help them scale professionally as well. We have 4 programs: entrepreneurship and professional development. We have the Women's Forum, the Youth, and 2 years ago we started an Invest in Pakistan Forum to help startups in Pakistan and the ecosystem in Pakistan as well. Our audience, because of COVID, thanks, we went online. We started doing many events online, and we have sold tickets in 339 cities around the world in 31 countries. So we are truly a global Pakistani organization, and we are very proud of it. You can follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. This is a slide which is very close to my heart. Strength in numbers. As you can see, we have 350 charter members. The open organization around the world has 350 charter members, and more than 100 founders. 90 are serial entrepreneurs. We have more than 300 corporate executives, part of our organization. 75% are masters and above. We have more than 100,000 members in our organization. 75 multimillionaires and 100 plus millionaires. Between 2017 and 2019, our founders raised more than $1 billion for their startups. And between 2017 and 2019, there were 10 billion plus of exits that they did. So this is what Open has to offer to its members and professionals who come in and talk to us about what they want in life, and we'll help them any way we could achieve that. Our annual forum is probably the largest gathering of Pakistani professionals outside of Pakistan anywhere in the world, period. And it attracts people from all over the world, from Canada, from Middle East, from London. We just had one last year. Well, many of you were part of that as well. If you have a chance, please be with us this year as well. This year again, I think we're doing it in November, right?
November 5th.
November 5th. And with that, I will hand it over to Asif to introduce our awesome guests.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Farhan. So it's my great pleasure to introduce both Aamir and Zayd. I'll start off actually very quickly that I've had the pleasure of actually doing a fireside chat with you. It's been a year now, Aamir, with you and Zayd. Well, one thing that Zayd doesn't know is that yes, his evaluation of his company is now at what, 1.6? Is it? Yeah. Close to another thing, evaluation that is going up along with his company is the wristwatch he hijacked when he was 4. So I'm keeping tab of that. But I've known with interest it will become very, very expensive. But I'll start off with you, Aamir. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about just who is Aamir, how did you get into Jazz or what you did before that? That would be great. Unfortunately, we have just one mic, so I'm just going passing it over.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for having me over here. I don't really have a particularly interesting background. Grew up in Pakistan till the time I was perhaps 18. Studied at HSN. My profession was playing cricket, and I would have done anything to actually just continue playing cricket. But I had to abandon that dream for maybe want of talent or whatever you may call it. Came to UT Austin over here, and then moved back to Pakistan. Started off with a company called Mobile Link. At that time, it was a Motorola joint venture. And the cell phone revolution hadn't really quite kicked off in Pakistan. Spent 7-8 years with that company, and then went for my MBA to Switzerland, IMD, worked with Jaguar Land Rover, Ford Motor Company across different continents, Middle East, London, a little bit in Germany. And then I came back to Pakistan again. So there's always this thing about people coming back to Pakistan or not. Some of you must think about this. When is the right time? Is the country going to get any better? I have moved back to Pakistan 3 times, and I've enjoyed it every single time, and every single time it's been more rewarding. So 2008, I went back to Pakistan. Then in 2013, I left again. I was with Telenor for about 6 years, and then in 2015, I got a call back from somebody and said, this company where I started my career called Mobile Link is going south, and I want you to come and try to rescue it. And you have some emotional affiliation with it, so please help me out. And I was like, I've done Pakistan, I've done telecom, I've done the role that you're offering me. I wasn't particularly excited. And then the APS thing happened, a brutal school disaster in Peshawar. And I don't know, for whatever odd reason, I thought that maybe I need to come back one more time and see if I can make some kind of an impact in a slightly different environment. So I moved back to Pakistan in 2015 and have been back there since then. In the last 6 years, I've been running what is now called Jazz. It's the name of our prepaid brand from 20 plus years ago. But Jazz is the combination of Mobilink and Bharat. Bharat was another telecom company that we acquired immediately after I came in. So that's who I am, and at a personal level, I don't know if you're interested or not, but I've got 2 kids, and one of them just graduated from Georgetown, and we're here on a family holiday visiting some friends, and my daughter's a sophomore at Northeastern. So that's me.
Thank you, and congratulations on your son's graduation. Zad, what about you? Can you just tell a little bit about who Zad is, and then we'll double click into it later, but just a little bit of how Aamir and about that.
Yeah, so I'm nowhere near as successful as Aamir. But I came, was originally born in the States, we moved to Pakistan, lived there for about 10 years or so. I came out of California about 14 years, so I was at high school, I did high school and no school in Pakistan, but I dropped out and came out to California and sort of enrolled in community college because I got this offer at the startup company to come work there. So I went to work at that startup company and took classes at community college, transferred to Berkeley from that experience, and then got really fascinated by the brain at UC Berkeley at this place called the Redwood Center for Theoretical Neuroscience. And how does machine learning and AI help us understand how the brain functions? And that sent me down this path of trying to understand machine learning and the mathematics behind it. So I ended up enrolling at Stanford for a PhD. I worked with this gentleman named Sebastian Thrun, who basically started the Google self-driving car and sort of built the first self-driving car that drove in the Mojave Desert. So I was really fortunate to work with a lot of really talented, really driven people and sort of explore the applications of machine learning for real world. How do you help enhance productivity? And basically focus on this thesis that AI can help empower people to be dramatically more productive. And that was my PhD thesis. And about 3 years into the PhD, we were getting really fantastic results in terms of the kind of impact the technology was having with our pilot customers in the Bay Area, that my co-founder and I decided to drop out of Stanford and we started the company Cresta. So it's been about 4 years now with Cresta, sort of building that company. Really lucky to have customers like everyone from Porsche to Verizon to Adobe to Intuit. Have the opportunity to serve them, and sort of really fantastic investors like Sequoia and Andreessen Horowitz. But it's been a journey to sort of transition from Pakistan to California to PhD to becoming a CEO, so it's been interesting.
And before you talk about Cresta, if you can, for the audience here, talk a little bit about MediConnect also. I just want to, for the audience in here, the bug that you had at 14 or 15 years old when you were at KGS in Karachi, the company that you started.
Yeah. So I started an unsuccessful company in Karachi. Cresta also is yet, we have a lot of things to do, a lot of work to do. But yeah, in Karachi, basically, I sort of, in the Pakistani healthcare market, there is no third-party health insurer like there is in the United States healthcare market, and there's a direct, I mean, everyone here knows this, you directly pay for healthcare out of pocket. And there's really no visibility or transparency in understanding everything from quality of doctors or sort of whether they're certified or like how long the wait time is or whether patients are happy with their bedside manner. So we basically created, with my friend in high school, we created a web portal that is a marketplace for booking doctor's appointments and allow you to do reviews and schedule those appointments. And we actually got sort of, we signed partnerships actually with Alpha and NMI and OMI, some of these major hospitals there. And they were sort of had their schedules available for some of the doctors on our platform, and folks could book it online. What we found in that thing was, this is 2009, 2008, is that it was still early for people to feel comfortable with medical information and booking medical appointments online. There really wasn't a big e-commerce marketplace either there. So because of that, the consumer behavior wasn't there for folks to book appointments and sort of be comfortable with medical transactions online. So about a year into it, I got a lot of pressure from family in terms of figuring out what my school situation would be. So we sort of wrapped that up. We went to Australia, presented at this PICTA award, but it wasn't a successful company. I think the timing was a little bit early. I do think if I stuck there longer, one of the lessons for me was persistence, actually. Even when things don't work out, if you just stick at it, a lot of these things will work out. And I do think it's a really good opportunity in Pakistan right now. There are folks working on it now as a really interesting problem. And so I think it's a big opportunity there.
I'll come back to you, Zayd, but I just want to move back to Aamir. Aamir, tell us a little bit. I mean, what an amazing career. I mean, I know on and off in Pakistan, but you know that space, landscape really well. And a lot of us sitting in here, we are very interested in knowing the whole ecosystem of Pakistan, of what it is, what are the opportunities. And for many who are sitting in here, how can we help? Right? I mean, that is always the first thing. But not necessarily on how we can help, but to understand from a leader of a company in Pakistan, which is very successful, which is growing, which is expanding, which is doing new things. Want to know a little bit about you doing business in Pakistan. What is it like? And that would be great to get a view from you.
So I think a lot of you already are clued in, connected physically or variously to many stories and people in Pakistan. And some of you actually have, as I met Naveen right before coming over here, constantly going back. There isn't really any mystery. Like any other frontier market, like any other challenging environment, Pakistan is both a land of opportunity, but it has its challenges. And I'm sure there are challenges over here also. People who are in a startup world, like they're challenged creating a better product. We actually perhaps put too much weightage on the environment around in Pakistan and at times get a little bit scared that you're like, okay, I don't know if I can hack it or not. But it's just a different kind of challenge, whether it's adaptability. Yes, setting up a company could be a cumbersome process. Dealing with some government institutions could be. But I can tell you of my experience, and I've been running this company, but there's certainly a few myths which perhaps have gotten more attention than they should. I have never been asked to give a grade. Like people actually find that absolutely surprising, like how can that be? But the fact of the matter is that at least in our industry that hasn't been the case. Yes, there's a lot of frustration. I have to bang my head a number of times to get some governmental intervention done for something that takes our country forward or helps us increase the penetration of broadband. But it's never been as obscene as, like, okay, unless you do this thing, I'm not going to give you that kind of equipment. So that's one of the things that people generally think about Pakistan here. So that's, let's keep that out of it. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. But I think the weightage and the barrier that we put in front of us doing some things over there is perhaps grotesquely overestimated. The ecosystem is evolving. It is a developing environment. It doesn't really have a frictionless evolution of your business. Like you will be dealing with the old thinking. You will be dealing with thinking that actually needs to be changed. You will be working with governmental policies and procedures which perhaps don't really have a justification to exist in the 21st century. And I think rather than just getting frustrated by them, what is perhaps missing at times is just the education process that, listen, there's a better way, there's a simpler way of doing things. And the default setting over there is just change resistance, as is the case in many other environments. So just like entrepreneurs over here, they keep on pushing, and like there isn't really a barrier, but you've got to keep on pushing. I would say that in a slightly different manner. Same is the case in Pakistan. You've got to keep on pushing. There are people who are willing to listen. And quite honestly, there are even bureaucrats who are willing to be coached and be educated. And I don't think what they want in return is necessarily something that isn't, oh, unless I do something for this person, I'm not going to make my way forward. It's really about, I don't know enough. But if we come in with an attitude that, you don't know anything, like the world has moved on, that really annoys any person. Nobody wants to feel as if they don't know enough, or even if they don't know enough, nobody should actually make them feel inferior. Many of the Pakistani diaspora, well-intentioned, who have tried to come and work with government more recently as special assistants to Prime Minister, and some of them have struggled to be in that thing, haven't been because they had bad intentions, but it's just that at times the approach has been, let me show you how to do it, right? So that kind of a thing is just not the right approach. If it's like, okay, let us together find a solution and I co-create a solution with you and I'm okay that you get the credit, that's a much better way of working with government, working with people across the world. When you come in with a thing that I've come from the land of plenty, I am 10, 20 years more advanced than you, like you're still just coming out of the cave, let me show you the light. That nobody really likes. And people who failed and who have struggled in this setup have been those who, sorry to use the word, had a chip on the shoulder or have a little bit of a let me show you the path kind of attitude. If we go and we focus only on finding the solution and we don't worry about who gets the credit, I think we could have made a lot more progress compared to where we are right now. And of course, the reason why we come over here, the reason why I came over here 30 years ago, or why you came here, Zayd, is because you want to get your mind opened up. You want to be in an environment, in a lab where there are going to be much smarter individuals. And then the country benefits when some of these individuals go back or in another direct way, share that learning. This is how our country progresses. So I think the country is ready. The challenges are perhaps over-accentuated. If we take the approach that what really matters is that we want to help, rather than who gets the credit, we can be making a lot more progress.
Awesome. I'll stay with you, Aamir, for this question. So let's talk a little bit about the telcos, right? The telecommunication industry. I mean, it is up for disruption, and more so in a country like Pakistan, where I would say that it's an imperative to have a mobile phone in Pakistan, in the village where you may not have electricity, but you will have a mobile phone. Talk to us a little bit about that journey of, and it's incredible that you have been part of that journey, and you should be very proud of that. Tell us about how that journey has taken place, and you as a leader. And I want to emphasize today, we have these two amazing leaders today. I really want to focus about you as Aamir and you as the CEO or as the leader, and you, Zayd, as the CEO of Presta, and earlier with all the work that you have done. So going back to you, Aamir, the disruption, how do you as Aamir, really spearhead that change, the disruption in telco, the mobiles that you see in that one small village that maybe, that everybody in the house has it. How have you, what are the challenges and any inspiration in there would be good to know.
So, telecommunications has been a relatively big success story in Pakistan. We have about 220 million Pakistanis, about 175, 180 million SIMs. So that's not necessarily number of people, that's just the number of SIMs that we have. So it's a 85% penetrated market, and we go far and long in every single local corner. But still, there are about 12 to 13% of Pakistanis who do not have access to any kind of communication. But telecommunications is a utility, and perhaps we provide this utility to more Pakistanis than those who have access to clean drinking water, electricity, medical. So in that sense, perhaps our product has been used in Jazz as a single brand is perhaps the biggest. It's a Pakistani brand, even though it's not a Pakistani word, but it's the largest Pakistani brand which covers the breadth and width of Pakistan. When I started, like, without revealing how old I am, but literally a dinosaur when it comes to this thing, in 93 or 94, I started working in this company. And our first business plan was that we should have about 25,000 customers, right, literally. Today we have about 75 million customers. And this is the evolution over 30 years or so, 25 years ago. Like, we always thought that it's going to be a fancy gadget, maybe like the Oculus is right now, that some people will wear and some won't, right? So it has moved a lot. And because we as a country did not really have landlines or fixed line communication, there was a great opportunity for us to leapfrog. So wireless technology became more prevalent. And competition does help. When two companies in Pakistan, they arrived in 2005, Bharat and Telenor, I think that's what gave Mobilink a wake-up call also. So the services had to improve, the penetration and the propagation of telecommunications went long and far. My recent most stint when I came back from Thailand to work again in Pakistan, I think the disruption, telecoms typically are lagging compared to other industries that you have had the opportunity to look at closely, especially those that you're in the valley. Telecom is an evolutionary thing. There will be newer technologies, there will be 3G, like 4G, 5G. The Gs will keep on adding, but our contribution in the real ecosystem is really more of an enabler, right? So it's what I say in Pakistan is telecom is not really a sector, it's a sector of sectors, because on this sector, once you have broadband and internet and connectivity, you start creating, so finance becomes fintech, agriculture becomes agri-tech. All of these suffixes that keep on getting added gets added because there's a smartphone in somebody's hand and there's internet connectivity. So we provide a very vital foundation layer. But I also recognize that telecoms around the world don't want to be just foundation layers, they want to also benefit from the richness that comes, which typically gets captured by all the companies which are involved in data, analytics, whether it's the Googles or the Metas of the world. So they're offering more enriched engagement with customers. And the dump it bite is not right. So when I moved back to Pakistan this time 7 years ago, there was a very clear shift on what does Jazz want to be. We don't want to be a telecom company. That doesn't mean that we're not going to build towers or sell SIMs. It just means that we have to move from becoming a telecom company to a technology company and eventually a data company. One of the biggest forays that we did, again, a gap in Pakistan, was finance and fintech. So we acquired or set up a bank, and now Jazz Cash is the largest payments processor, and we have applied for a digital banking license now. So that's basically the first foray into something which is generally called an adjacency. Then we're going into video. We have Tamasha, which has another million-odd customers, creating Pakistani content. Again, we don't anticipate that we will become the Netflix, but certainly a lot of entertainment in villages out there when they don't have big screens, the poor people and the less affluent ones are watching content on their small screens. So these are the things that we are moving to. We are working on super apps and engagement platforms, but like I said, the biggest one that we have is Jazz Cash, where there are about 15 million customers sending money, receiving money, opening bank accounts, getting loans, doing everything e-commerce through that platform. Awesome. So it comes with an intent and a realization that you have to do something different. I recognized 6-7 years ago that we can't be just a telecom company. I mean, there's literally no excitement over there. So unless, and I wouldn't say that I'm successful or we are successful, we're just very painfully aware and conscious that just being, what we were, what got us here is not going to get us there. Actually, we're not even going to survive if we don't change.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And we'll go a little bit deeper into fintech as I come back, because that's an area that I'm very passionate about. But going back to you, Zayd, two things I want to talk. One, obviously, which is a later question, so answer this one first. I want to know what is Presta for the folks in here. Everybody wants to know, so just a little bit of more detail. But before we do that, you mentioned something very important when we were talking earlier about perseverance, about persistence. when you were doing the startup in Pakistan. And now that you are CEO of this company that is evaluated at 1.6 around with customers like Porsches and Verizons and CarMax, I saw this article in New York Times the other day. Congratulations, by the way, that was amazing. That CarMax is also, which is amazing in this COVID time frame. It's really disrupting how things are happening. They are using Cresta. So I just want to know, you again, we'll talk about Cresta, but you, Zayd Enam, the CEO of Cresta, talk about a little bit about, not the challenges, but what is it really like as the CEO of this company, which is you're starting from day one, you have really built it up, there was no customers, and now you have these big names. Talk about perseverance and talk about persistence, if you have any examples. And then we'll go on to what is Presta.
Sure, yeah. So I guess to your earlier question about leadership.
Yeah.
I think that would be probably the biggest personal development. So Cresta, when I started Cresta, I was a PhD student, right? So as a PhD student, you're basically in your office all day writing code and then writing a paper. And you're basically telling your computer to do something, right? You write a piece of code, the computer does what it needs to do, and it spits out the output. When you're sort of transitioning from that kind of mindset to being a leader, that's a very different mindset, right? Because people aren't programs, and they're very non-deterministic programs. So the way you communicate and understand and have empathy for other people's perspectives and how to effectively lead, that's a skill set that needs to be developed. And I don't think it's actually focused on in our school systems. We don't actually focus on that aspect of empathy and leadership. So I wasn't the leader I should have been. So when I first started the company, I wasn't the manager or leader that the team needed me to be. And that was a personal development for myself over the years. And now we're 200 people, and I still don't think I'm the leader that the company needs me to be. And that's a constant process for me to continue to acknowledge that it's a development process and things I'm learning and getting better at, and things I want to keep improving and just being in service to the team. I think there's one core thing to it. Like, I think the best leadership is authentic. So if you're authentic to the mission and authentic to the team, in the sense that you're working in service to something greater than yourself, people will forgive a lot of things. And if you say sorry a lot, people will forgive a lot of things. But it needs to sort of the core be about authenticity. So at least that's been true for me for the last couple of years, or ever since Cresta started, or before Cresta started. So I think people have forgiven me for a lot of things that I needed to learn. But then it's if you have that, then you need to understand how do you inspire, motivate, see things from other people's perspectives, understand how do you communicate effectively. There's a lot of things there. So I know there's definite times I would have given up on Cresta. Like things that, well, the business didn't work, the team wasn't working, the customers weren't signing up. We were an enterprise, so it took us 2 years to get our first customer. So the first customer, I signed up as an intern to sign up that customer. So I got on the inside. Nobody was willing to give us data to train our models. So I ended up just joining a company as an intern, a Fortune 500 company. And once I was in, then I went to Tempe, Arizona, where all the contact centers were, deployed the software there. They loved it there. They wanted to expand it to Virginia, where the bigger contact center was. So that's when I went back to the CIO of this company and said, I'm an intern here, but you probably don't want an intern supporting this project. You probably want a SaaS contract with the company. And so we signed a standard SaaS agreement. But the thing is, the last clause of the agreement says this contract hereby terminates Zayd Enam's internship. And so every time we renew that contract, it's a funny reminder, I signed as the CEO of Presta and as a former intern at this Fortune 500, which is a funny reminder for renewals. But that was our first customer, and it took us a long time to sort of go from that first customer to repeatability across many customers, and so many places where things just weren't working. And I think in those times, the lesson was persistence. I think people try to convince themselves that, oh, I'm so smart, and I figured out the strategy of this thing, and I'm the world's best sort of entrepreneur, these kinds of things. And I feel like a lot of it is just you stick through it and you push through it, and it's not so much attributable to your intelligence or the way you approach it. It's did you give up? And these things change, markets change, technology is a fast-moving thing. And so what looks like today is not the same as what is going to be tomorrow. And sometimes luck, if you wait out long enough and you survive, sometimes luck is on your side. So I think that's the core of persistence and sort of being humble and approaching every day as though what you need to learn from leadership or from solving for customer pain points and these kinds of things.
Awesome, and then let's a little bit talk about Presta. So for everybody in here, what is Presta? Why is the companies that we took earlier, why are they using Presta? So if you can just tell us, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so Cresta started as a PhD project, and the thesis generally is that AI has gotten to the point that it can enable people to be superhuman. And we've been able to develop and build this kind of technology that can enable superhuman powers. But in order to do that, you can't just take off-the-shelf AI to make it possible. And so those superhuman powers result in 50%, 60% enhancements in productivity. And what we did is we took this technology, we applied it to a very specific pain point and domain, which is the contact center environment. So these are companies with large contact centers where they have customer support and sales reps. And what we're doing is that we're in real time understanding the conversation, transcribing it, and have natural language understanding that understands what's happening, what the customer conversation is, what the questions are asking, and then real time prompt the agent to more effectively answer the question or more effectively handle the sales conversation so they either have higher win rates on the sales call or they're able to more quickly resolve the customer issue or sort of prevent multiple calls. So the impact of that is businesses are making dramatically more money, and they're also seeing dramatically more efficiencies in this part of their business, where they're delivering better experiences and more efficient experiences. But the core genesis, or the core of that idea really about AI being an empowerment of humans and empowerment of people to help them be dramatically more productive, that's an idea that applies beyond the contact center into all types of knowledge work. And so whether it's someone in HR sort of having a conversation with an employee or a manager giving feedback, or it's someone in finance or legal doing these kinds of routine workflows. AI is a technology that's a general purpose technology, and over time we're going to start seeing its impact across these kinds of tools. But what we will see is an empowerment of the individual, empowerment of teams. And that's really what inspired me. That's the thesis I was working on, is that this technology is not against humanity, it's for humanity. Because there's this overarching thesis about AI as automation and AI is getting rid of jobs, but I think it's actually a technology that's there that we can use to actually advance and sort of be for the benefit of the community. But that's a quick summary of Cresta.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and that's fantastic, and maybe we'll do a bit more. And I totally agree with you around machine learning and AI. Is that I also actually work for a company, ThoughtTrace, which is a document understanding company, very much based on ML and AI. And the idea is very simple. It's simplifying the workflow for lawyers and GCs, which is that you have thousands of contracts that you have, and if you want to, in the time of COVID, if you want to find out things like force majeure to mitigate risk or to find opportunities, how do you extract, how do you use machine learning and AI to extract that information? So again, I always say that technology is an enabler, and it makes your job easier, not easy, kind of things, and you still need humans when you're talking about ML and AI, but it's really simplifying the workflow, it's really doing that. Talking of which, again, in many ways, Aamir, I think one thing that has changed our lives, right? I mean, I was fascinated to see your phone, the screen, but there has been a lot of it has really changed our lives, let's put it that way, right? For an individual, iPhones or Androids or any of the phones of the technology. And you were talking a little bit about, last time we were talking a little while ago about Fintech. What are you doing in Pakistan around Fintech? Because again, that is, I know you talked about some of the products that you have, but again, from a larger macro level, what do you see, from, again, as a CEO of a very large telco company, that how can your industry completely transform the fintech, which touches a lot of people? And again, what is the definition for you for fintech in that sense?
So we all define fintech slightly differently in such a vast subject, but I think even before we talk about fintech, the basic finance has been missing in Pakistan, so it's a little bit behind many of the environments. You'd be surprised to know that about 80% of Pakistani adults do not have access to any kind of a financial instrument, organized financial instrument. Of course, they're going to borrow money from somebody, but they have been mostly disenfranchised. So just like in telecommunications, we were left far behind, and now we've made it universally accessible to every single person, regardless of where they reside or their income bracket. We have made it affordable, and Pakistan is one of the countries which has got the lowest tariff rates. So we have provided what I call is a joke about this, that this is effectively our remote control to our lives. Like it's not just a communication tool. You get entertained over it, you do commerce over it, you get educated. So I think it was a basic empowerment tool for every single individual in the country and across, not just in our country, but everywhere else in the world. We saw a huge gap that while telecommunications and entertainment and content has been made available, but one of the other fundamental, almost rights that an individual should have is have access to some kind of a banking product. That did not exist in Pakistan. Is fairly fragmented. It has more than 35 different banks operating in the country. Yet, as I mentioned earlier, about 80% of the adults do not have access to a bank. So we realized that everybody has a phone, but people don't have bank accounts. So why don't we bring the bank to the phone? And that's the genesis of the bank that we bought, which is Livelihoods Microfinance Bank. And people had heard about Grameen Bank. It was basically collateralized communal lending with very high recovery rates, and it's basically to provide credit to the bottom of the pyramid. So that's where we started from. But now, as we have transgressed over the last 10 years, it became a payments tool. So people could actually, one of the biggest use cases in Pakistan, or the challenges was how do migrant workers send money back home. So it became almost instantaneous and very quick and convenient and safe. The second use case was paying of utility bills. Now again, I'm talking about 5-6 years ago, right? So how do we make utility bills more convenient for people to pay? Now it has gone to a point where we want to open bank accounts. You can do it that within 30 seconds. You can get a loan. We are putting AI so that you can assess what kind of interest rate you need to give to one type of a customer versus the other. But the whole idea has been around building on payments, because payments is a habit. We just get people to start paying using jazz cash, and then on top of that, all the other financial well-being products, whether that's insurance, nano insurance, there's ability to save, to borrow, anything that a typical bank does, that's what we want to do. And Pakistan is right now, as a country, going through that thing I already mentioned. We have about 35 odd commercial banks, but the State Bank of Pakistan has recently come up with regulations on how to start a digital bank. And there has been a lot of interest from different people around the world, so about 25 different applications. And there are going to be about 5 digital banks which will start operations by the end of the year. Hopefully we are one of them. But whether we are or whether we aren't, the good thing is that we are actually, as a country, thinking about using technology to solve some of the bigger problems. And that's what the exciting thing is in that regard. So, we will still continue to find these massive gaps, because what we do as a company, and certainly my ambition to help along with my colleagues, is that how do we keep on giving something back, not just in terms of very basic CSR, and there's nothing wrong with that, planting trees and opening schools, but how do you solve massive problems that a country faces? And fortunately, the products and in the area that I've been involved with can certainly do massive interventions, whether that's towards education. We were talking about with one of your colleagues right before. It could be designing. I happen to be on certain boards where the government is involved. So working with the government, both in a private partnership, private-public partnership, but also as a thought leader in terms of using technology to take the country forward. Right? So and again, that's a different subject, but I think the opportunity that we have is not just about providing a phone in everybody's hand, but actually really using their phone to fix some of the issues that the country faces.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this is a question to both of you, I think, is that the way I see it of how the technology has really evolved is that I very vividly remember about not too long ago, about 3 years, 4 years ago, that every time I'm going on a vacation with my family, that one part of the suitcase is with a DSLR camera with a lot of lenses. Not anymore. My iPhone or my smartphone is good enough. And there's a lot of technology in there at the background. There is AI and ML that is happening, that the photograph that I'm taking, it's a beautiful photograph that is being taken with that simple phone. And the point I'm trying to make is that we are actually using AI and ML in so many different ways. We don't even know we are using it, but it's at the background. Photograph is one of them. So again, as you guys build product, as you're building Fintech, and Zayd, as you're building Presta, how important it is to mention AI, or for you as you're building, is it about simplifying the workflow, or it is about the technology, or is it both, or how do you actually market it? I'll start with you and then I'll come to you.
So ultimately, the customers, individuals, they buy benefits. They don't buy technologies. They want a problem to be solved, right? So you could have, I'm sure that, and I work in the industry, probably has 200 features that I haven't used, right?
Yeah.
So basically, it could just be WhatsApp, browsing, email, communications, a few other apps. So sometimes as marketeers, and especially as product marketeers, we overemphasize this is so much better, faster, etc., etc. But from a customer perspective, what does it do for me? That really makes me feel good because, okay, this phone, this is an iPhone, slightly older one, probably does exactly the same thing that phone 1/3 its price or 1/5 its price does. But maybe what it does for me is that, oh, I belong to the Apple community, or I have an iPhone 14, which is exactly like iPhone 13, but just 6 months later. So what is the customer buying? Customer is buying a feature, especially those who work in sports cars. They buy a lifestyle, or they buy some kind of a sense of belonging, right? We have to think about eventually the benefit. It could both be an emotional benefit, it could be a quantifiable benefit. Like, for example, I don't have the ability to send funds from one place to the other. That's a problem that I'm solving. But if I inundate the customer with that, our solution can does 45,000 transactions per second, and they just say, I want my money to go from one place to the other place safely. So we must always be cognizant that technology, just for the sake of technology, may not necessarily appeal to people. You have to solve a quantifiable problem. And you can use AI for that, you can use process improvements for that. Not everything may require a super sophisticated solution. But in successful companies, what I have seen is that they have a lot of obsession around the customer. So they literally have to make the customer sit as part of their board members, on their product forums. If they are thinking what the customer pain points are, we will find a solution. Many a times, and especially in the industries that we're dealing with, the solutions come from a technological standpoint. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but you can't push technology if there isn't really a quantifiable benefit for them.
Great point. Zayd, and I know you have some slides also, so if you can just do a deeper dive, but again, to the question that I raised, right, about technology, of how front and center technology is, or is it more about solving the workflow that we were talking about? So if you want to show some slides.
Yeah, I think there's two camps to this, right? There's the camp that AI is a feature in an existing solution, and then there's the camp that AI fundamentally is a different architecture, and you have to rethink the architecture from the ground up. I think, so the feature folks will say that, oh, it's another feature that you add on to your product or solution, and it's sort of, it doesn't matter. It's like just another feature like I have, cloud or something like that. I think that's short-sighted. I don't think that fully appreciates what's actually happening right now. The camp I'm in is that it's fundamentally a different architecture. So AI from the ground up, those kinds of businesses that are being built with AI as a fundamental building block to enable experiences that weren't possible before. Now, how you market it and how you do all these kinds of things, that's a fundamentally different thing. It's like, you have to obviously market to customer pain points, and you have to market from the empathy of the customer perspective. But sort of boxing AI as a feature, I just think that's short-sighted and lacks vision. And you see this, you're going to see this. So like, if it's a self-driving car, you can bolt on AI as a self-driving car and call it a feature on a self-driving car, but the true self-driving cars that are sort of really going to hit, those are fundamentally rethinking what the concept of transportation is, right? And that's rethinking what the architecture of a car should be based on that. And that's really going to be the game changer for what transportation looks like. So it's just going to happen, it just takes time.
Awesome. And do you want to show something before I open up for questions and
Oh, sure, yeah. I can show
a few, three, yeah, just very quickly, because I even before when we started, a lot of people were asking about a little bit about Presta. So if you don't mind, if you can share a slide or two, that would be good.
Yeah, I mean, I can really quickly share, but basically, the thing is that superhumans are here. AI has gotten to the point that it's enabled people to dramatically enhance their productivity, and we can get folks to be 50 to 60% more productive. We started this technology, first application in the contact center, because in today's era, the contact center is the storefront for your business. It's the front door, because your retail storefront is optional, but your digital storefront is now essential. And so in this contact center environment, what we built is a technology that's basically listening, and it's identifying this is a nice demonstration of Cresta that does not work. That's fine. Well, maybe manually.
That's okay. Why don't you? Yeah.
Well, we'll just move forward. But it's basically, we've gotten to the point where we can transcribe conversations, understand what's going on, and provide real-time recommendations as those conversations are going on. And so we've gotten this to work now with companies like our large number of Fortune 500 customers. And so companies like CarMax, for example, are seeing dramatically faster call times, higher sales conversions, and just a really big ROI on the dollars invested. Companies like Holiday Inn Clubs, they dramatically enhance their call times, and they cut their employee attrition in half. So before, on average, their employees would stick around for 10 months. They had 120% attrition. They've gone that down to 60% attrition. Because not only is the tool making people more productive, but it's actually making them happier because they're doing less boring, tedious things on a day-to-day basis. And so they see this massive ROI in the business. And then companies like Blue Nile that sell more diamonds. So they have 11% more sales leveraging this kind of technology to power their sales chat and sales phone as folks are shopping for diamonds online. We were really lucky, so all these results are happening, and it's part of the zeitgeist now, because this kind of concept of AI enhancing productivity is a fundamental question that folks are asking. So this is yesterday's New York Times front page of the business section, and so this Pulitzer Prize winning journalist named Steve Lohr, he basically talked about how we haven't yet seen aggregate labor statistics get to the point where we're seeing impact on productivity. But he did an interview with one of our customers, Jim Liskey at CarMax, and CarMax is seeing 10% improvements in AHT and sales conversion. So this stuff is working, and it's working now. And a little bit about Cresta, sort of really, there's a lot of things on this slide, and this is called the ego slide, but the key thing for me is that at the bottom, 90% of agents say that they love Cresta, but not only do they love Cresta, they love their jobs more because of Cresta. So as a call center agent, you're happier as an agent in your job because AI is helping you empower you, helping make you more productive, taking away some of the tedious things of the job, and just ultimately making you happier, which I think is really cool and makes me, this is why I do it, because I'm proud of being able to build technology that really people love and helps them be happier. But yeah, that's Cresta.
Awesome. So I'll again ask a question for both of you, and I'll start with you, Zayd, first. And if any questions, please raise your hands after this question. Again, one of the challenges in today's world where we are living is the constant change, that the world is changing really rapidly. I mean, unfortunately, we all have to go through pandemic. We saw things forced upon us, rightly or wrongly, on how we have to behave, how we have to act, how we have to bank, how we have to buy stuff and all that. So how do you keep up with it, Zayd? I mean, I know your company is about 4.5 years, but again, rapidly keeping up and seeing where the puck is going, whether or not the puck is. How do you do that as a leader? Again, this is a leadership question. that how do you keep on top of it? And then I'll come back to the same question for you.
Yeah, I think, so I think you're in a fast-changing environment. I think for a startup, fast-changing environments are actually better for startups than they are for large companies, because naturally, by default, startups shouldn't exist. Like, there's no reason anyone wants another company, another product in the world to exist. So by default, it shouldn't exist. But in fast-changing environments, there's often opportunities for startups to sort of kind of just get a ledge or a wedge into enterprise accounts. So when the pandemic happened 2 years ago, for us, like, all companies had to sort of shift from retail operations to digital operations overnight, right? And then all of a sudden, you have 10,000 customer support reps taking phone calls from the bedroom. How do you train them when they're taking phone calls from the bedroom? How do you onboard a new representative? How do you share knowledge or new practice or new procedure? That's really when you need to start investing in technology that can help train and onboard and help folks be dramatically more productive. And that's really became, for us, like a really key part of our product market fit in these kinds of environments. So I think the nimbleness of a startup is that you can sense opportunities and you can take advantage of opportunities. And so these kinds of changes are actually good for small companies as long as they remain nimble. The things you have to be aware of, obviously, is that it's a balance, right? These kinds of things are always they're always a balance of, like, how much are you going to sort of identify a shiny object and sort of completely change the company's trajectory to try to capture that shiny object versus whether it's actually something that's going to take the company to the next level. I don't have a rule for that. I think it's more intuition and understanding how that fits into the strategy of the company. And I don't think there's some hard and fast rules there, but I think you just develop that intuition over time. I do think that this is these kinds of fast-changing environments are better for startups than they are for big companies, though. Or nimbly moving big companies versus slow moving big companies.
Awesome. And I'll throw another question on top of that, Aamir, because again, you are a leader in Pakistan, and Pakistan, you know, there are some other factors also that play in, aka the politics and all that. So I think it just makes it more challenging. But I don't know, whatever you can talk about of the ever-changing, how do you keep up with it?
So with a lot of stress. There are two elements. One, we have to be relevant and constantly keep on seeing how the situation around us is changing from a technological perspective. So we have to be mindful of the fact that we don't know all the answers. So one of the things that I promote within the organization is reverse mentoring. So, you know, we need to bring in the workforce of tomorrow, the brain power of tomorrow, because otherwise if the company is dependent on me to provide vision, that's not really going to happen. It's not necessarily always successful. So we have to create at least an environment where the more dynamic workforce considers it for their future, an area where they want to contribute. The second part about how do you cope up with the ever-changing, let's say, political environment, that comes with the territory. As I mentioned right in the beginning, like every frontier market has challenges. There are infrastructure challenges, there are legislative challenges, there are political instability challenges. In Pakistan, unfortunately, we also have occasionally, although we have now overcome them, security challenges. So this kind of an environment is, funnily enough, also keeps me energized because there's never a dull moment, right? So you're dealing with them. But it also gives you a great opportunity to actually work with the leadership of the country and to ensure that they understand the opportunity that they sit upon. And again, since most of you are familiar with Pakistan, unfortunately, our economic czars do not put in that much effort into new economy, new industry as they do on the traditional ones, whether it's energy or agriculture, sugar, cement, etc., etc. So those are the things in businesses or textiles that the country and the economic czars who run, whether they come through being a finance minister or a commerce minister or a planning minister, they all have those experiences and they are more familiar with that. To them, fintech and any kind of technology or even telecom seems a little bit more alien. And also because we don't necessarily have many local success stories in this environment who can actually sit in the Senate or the National Assembly or whatever else to have influence. These foreign companies are represented by people like me who are pretty much employees. So our ability to engage with them is academic, is sincere, but it is not as well entrenched as that of the other industries. So that's a struggle that I always have. But despite that, I think we've been able to make a lot of inroads. And the country and the leadership, at least in the past, and I hope even right now, does recognize that without not only proactively embracing but supporting technology, we will be left behind. We're missing a lot of opportunities. And what I provide is just the foundation or the infrastructure there. There are so many other exciting things that can reside on top of that. Just like I said, all of our industries are going to get disrupted because of technology, whether it's fintech, agri-tech, edge-tech, you name it. So we just have to, continuously keep on working with that changing dynamic environment. Like I said, it is stressful because, and it's painful at times because you start fostering the relationship with one stakeholder and that person then changes, whether it's the prime minister or the finance minister, and then you have to start again. And you have to put that sweat and equity back into that education process. But that also, in a way, like I said, energizes me to make sure that I don't get frustrated only, but there's another opportunity to work with a new set of colleagues.
Awesome. Awesome. I want to open it up for questions. Any questions? Whoa, lots of questions. That's awesome. I think you raise your hand first, so I'll go with you.
My question is this, sir.
Can you please stand up and tell your name?
Actually, he mentioned APS as the reason to come back to Pakistan. I would like to ask him if he has done anything to help people like in that situation.
So again, not directly, but indirectly, all of our main program is empowering the lives and livelihoods of women through technology. So I know that there were girls in that school, but one of the fundamental things that we believe in that we can use technology to help educate. So we have invested in knowledge platforms. We have gone specifically to schools where we're using and providing tools where they can learn in a more immersive manner. So that is our contribution. We work with the military in many different ways, but like I said, not directly towards APS, but overall for education, for security, for safety. Those are the things that we're working on.
Awesome.
That was not my question. Like we have AI people here.
Yeah.
I meant technologically. Like everybody has got a phone, and the AI is available at the edge now. It's not on the cloud only.
Sure.
The phone should be able to tell a safe route for people like APS victims to go and exit. In a situation like that, your phone should be able to give them direction where to run. These sort of things I'm thinking. This can be done. Actually, in Texas, what happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
This would have been done.
Got it.
Yeah. So
Second, Hamad.
So I have three questions.
Wow. Let's start with one.
So for Aamir, for you, I think you touched upon it a little bit. I have to start a little bit of context. So we had an amazing open SV event like a few weeks back, and we had a ton of new startups come from Pakistan. And talking to them, I at least realized that the technology exists as smart people, they understand the technology. But the barriers that they're facing, in addition to what you talked about politics, is people and cultural. Some of the solutions they're providing, like the people and the culture are not receptive to it yet. What would you advise them? That's one question. And for Zayd, for your question is, when did you realize that this is a $1 million idea or question? And in addition to what you talked about, like understanding technology and leadership, what other things got you to the finish line? Like, okay, this is a $1 million now. And also for you, something I've been wondering every weekend: what's the secret to your Bentley burger? So I know that stuff.
Okay, so let me start hoping that I can answer your question. The cultural context is different, and I don't know how long you've been over here, but whenever you decide to move back and work with different things, even though you may come from there, things keep on evolving. And that does require persistence, right? So it's, I have a lot of admiration for people who give up careers over here, want to come back. The sincerity is admirable. But I've seen many of them get frustrated. So you just have to have a lot more perseverance. And as I mentioned earlier on, if we go and take the approach which inadvertently reeks of any kind of intellectual arrogance that I know better, that in a way creates a barrier for people that you have to onboard as co-creators of whatever it is that you're trying to build. So I would just say that if we just take a little bit of a different approach, have a lot of patience, but not just patience as things will change. I would say grit and perseverance, right? You've got to keep on pushing. But the approach with which you actually work really could change the probability of success. And what I have seen as a common factor of people failing is that they come up with this thing that I know better. And I've come over here to get you out of this cave that you've been sitting in for the last 20 years. That does not water down well.
So how do we do that?
Just 1 second, let finish this and then we'll come back to you. Just 1 second, let him answer the question first. Then. Go ahead.
Should we? Okay, okay, good. The question was, you said finish line. We're not. We're just getting started, so we're not at finish line by any means.
And I think the question was that $1 billion. I mean, were you thinking about? Yeah.
At what point did you realize?
So for me, it was I think for me it was just. So the very honest truth is, I became really passionate about the idea of this kind of technology. There's this big mural in Detroit. So I lived in Detroit for a little bit. If you go to the Ford, where the old Ford Motor Companies used to be, this gentleman named Diego Rivera, he painted this big mural of the Ford Motor Company in the early 1910s. And in the early 1900s, it was Ford and General Motors that came up with this concept of an assembly line. And they basically built this assembly line that was a game changer for productivity of cars. Because before the assembly line, it would take 800 hours for someone to produce a car. And cars were, because of that, expensive and unreliable, and only the rich could really afford them. It was the invention of this assembly line concept that really made cars, they could build a car in 2 hours and 30 minutes, and cars became available for the middle class. And so we could have roads that could go from one place to another, and folks could go to restaurants, and go to university, and visit friends, and just completely change the way they all lived. And it was just core of this basic idea of an assembly line, which is a basic technology on how to organize labor to produce something that dramatically changed the way we all live. So I came across this mural again while I was in the PhD at Stanford, and it struck me that this is exactly the same kind of work I'm doing. Like, I was doing this PhD thesis, and I was trying to figure out at the time, like, how do I build these kinds of tools to help people be more productive in the day-to-day work. And you can just see in the painting there's an optimism at that time that we can build this kind of technology, we can build a future that just is better. And so when I saw that painting, I got this massive print of it in my apartment. So it's a small dorm room in my apartment. I got this big piece of plywood, I cut it on, I glued it onto that, and just put it on my wall. And I just see it every single day. And it was just very, for me personally, very inspirational because there's something about that painting and I carry it around with me everywhere I go, every new house or apartment I move into. But that was for me the mission. Like, if we can build technology that does enhance the productivity of people, the impact will be just as big as the impact of production of a car and the production of the assembly line. Did I know it was $1 billion idea? There were many times I thought Presta would fail. There was a time when we had 3 months of funding left in the bank, and not now. So, and so I was like, shit, man, 3 months. I'm sure there were days I was like, yeah, we're going to make it, and there were days that it did not seem like it was going to happen. So there wasn't anything there, but I just knew it was something I wanted to work on for the rest of my life. Like, this idea that I could build this kind of technology and enhance productivity felt to me like just as game-changing as the assembly line. And so that's why I wanted to be a part of it. That's it.
He has been raising hands for a while, and after that,
Thank you. I have a question to Zayd in regards to Cresta. That on real time, once these call center agents, they're talking to their clients or potential clients. So they have all the history and everything. Is this some, like, do they have displays in front of them that, okay, this is the client that talked to somebody else, but because that's some of the time the clients face that problem, that the other person doesn't know the history or their choices or their previous, like, based on that, like, it's so easy to close the sales and win those sales. So is that, like, how does that work? It's very inquisitive and very interesting. Congratulations, Zayd, everything that Cresta has done.
Thank you. Yeah. So if you go to these there's contact centers, many in Pakistan, there's many across the United States, Philippines, India. Predominantly, folks have a headset on. They have 1 or 2 screens in front of them, and on the screen they're interacting with some kind of enterprise software, a CRM, or some other software. And so Cresta integrates onto those systems. It's sort of on the screen. It's transcribing that call in real time. So it's basically understanding what's happening, what is the customer asking, what's the context of this customer, and then making recommendations on the screen to the agent, and basically guiding them through the conversation on, here's the piece of information, or here's the automated workflow that you were going to click through, but we've done it for you automatically. So it saves you a little bit of time. Basically, it's doing that for the representatives.
That's awesome.
Cool.
So, I'm Naveed Iftihar. Unfortunately, I couldn't drop out of
Can you
PhD.
please stand up and so that others
Yeah,
can see
sure.
you?
So, I'm Naveed Iftihar. So, unfortunately, I couldn't drop out of PhD. So, I won't be able to build a unicorn. So,
But your
was-
doctor to be the I guess.
Yeah, sort of. So I have a startup based in Pakistan. So what I'm trying to do is a continuous learning platform. So at least what I can do that I can send people to work on for unicorns. So the kind of skills and technologies that you are talking about when we see the Pakistan's labor force, so that's why most of the work is now going to India or other countries. So what do you have to say about the skill development if we have to prepare the labor force, say for Cresta? And what is your experience so far if you have some of the staff and engineers from Pakistan, and what else we need to do? So it's more about bringing that skilled labor force. So this is part of work that I'm doing in my startup called Atom Camp.
Cool. And so the question is sort of thoughts on the teams or the people in Pakistan and sort of for software engineering, these kinds of roles. Yeah, so I learned programming in Pakistan. I think Pakistan's biggest asset, actually, honestly, young people. Like, there's so many intelligent, highly energetic, passionate young people in Pakistan, and if you look at it, right, majority of Pakistani population is below the age of 25, or there's some number, right? The vast, like, we're just going to have this really great golden years of Pakistan when these very young people are going to go into their teens and 20s and 30s, and they're just going to bring so much passion and energy into the economy. And I'm tired of all these, like, there's all these historic feudal systems that have made Pakistan into the just complete bullshit politics that we have today, that I don't even engage in those politics. What I'm really waiting for is that time when you have these folks who aren't sort of engaged in those politics, but are instead recognizing that technology and software, these kinds of things, that they can create more wealth and create a bigger economy. And when you have that, and you have this wide number of really young people doing that, that wealth generated by those folks will be so much more than what the feudal systems are able to produce, that you're just going to see this shift in power in the country. And so for me, that's what I'm super optimistic over the next couple of decades is going to happen. You're going to see that shift in Pakistan, just because the wealth possible to be generated by information technology is just so much more than what the feudal systems can provide. So one, I'm overall very optimistic about what the next couple of decades hold for Pakistan. Two, I think that there's very talented people already in Pakistan. So we have a small team in Lahore, very dedicated, very bright people. And I'm going to be visiting Lahore. We're going to expand that office. But I think software is a thing where there are people who have 100x more productivity than others, and that kind of talent is not just, isn't in the Bay Area, it's all over the place. You just need to be able to nurture and educate and coach that talent. And we certainly have a few folks in Lahore that I would say are dramatically more productive, and we're going to continue to invest there and sort of expand our operations there.
Before I go to Yusuf, but very quickly, maybe quick, what do you talk about? I think that's an important topic about talent in Pakistan, or talent overall. If you can talk about it, Yusuf, then you can ask questions.
So any specific aspect? No, so again, we are producing a lot of young talent, but I think they need to be honed also. I seldom get recruits that can start producing that. I think that's the same case everywhere else also. I think the quality of output certainly needs to improve a little bit. We were having this discussion right before I got into this room. There are about 30,000 computer science graduates that are coming out of Pakistan. But even the bigger software houses over there need to put them through about 6 months or 8 months of their own development thing before they can actually start being really productive. So I think the raw ingredients are there, but they need a little bit of honing, which again, I don't find that a whole lot different from any other setup either. So we just need to continuously keep on ensuring that there are opportunities for those 20,000 that are coming out, otherwise they will be actually more disenchanted or disenfranchised. The talent is certainly good. I just think that there is responsibility on all of us to make sure that we can actually hone them. That's what I would say.
Cool. Yusuf.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Yusuf Mamsa. I have a question for you, Aamir. How is the adoption of 5G going on in Pakistan, and what opportunities do you see specifically for the Pakistan market for 5G?
So my public and personal opinion on 5G is that Pakistan doesn't need 5G, and as a technology guy, it sounds very strange that I would make a comment like that. When I look at the country, we have to come up with technologies that benefit everybody, and we're still far behind the rest of the world. My approach is that we should have 4G for all rather than 5G for a few. If I were to go and indulge in 5G, I have to buy spectrum. Currently, less than 1% of our population uses or has a 5G enabled thing. So if I allocate a lot of my, and by I means Pakistan's limited foreign exchange on 5G, it will benefit 1% of our population. So it would be a misuse of scarce resources, regardless of whether I have access to those dollars or not. What I do know is that 50% of Pakistanis are still not connected on the internet. So my priority should be connecting those 50%. And these technologies trickle down. We start focusing on the top, we start ignoring the bottom. If I have a role to play, I would rather take all of the country forward, leave no person behind in this internet revolution, rather than trying to bring in a super Rolls-Royce kind of a product for somebody, for a very small sliver. Now that doesn't mean that we're opposed to technology, it's just not the right time. We have tested it successfully in Pakistan. Our network is 5G ready. We're working with the government to create 2 or 3 success stories across different cities where we can perhaps showcase that we have 5G, but it has to require a very different mindset. Many people in Pakistan, as with anywhere else in the world, think that 5G is basically a faster 4G, which it is. But the real benefit of 5G is really thriving in Internet of Things, where you have a lot of connected devices in a very small geographical footprint, or in an environment where you need very low latency. So autonomous vehicles, a person comes in front of you, you need to send a signal back and forth so the car stops. Those kind of use cases in Pakistan, I don't think we will see in the next 10 years. So just jumping on the 5G bandwagon because we also have 5G because the rest of the world has it, could be an expensive adventure which the country doesn't necessarily need. So that's my view, both official and personal. I think they will still find a creative way of bringing 5G to Pakistan, but not as in massive scale. We still have many people in Pakistan who are just not using broadband, so that's where my priority is.
Thank you. Go ahead. Yeah. Last 3 questions, guys.
Junaid, my question is for Aamir about Fintech in Pakistan.
Sorry,
about Fintech in Pakistan. So, talk a little bit about Jazz. Is it a domestic product or is it a cross-border product? Specifically, a use case that say, can I talk about something for my brother, right? And can he use that actually in a store, or is it just a person-to-person? What's the landscape today, and what are you guys thinking about it? And I do have a second question related, but is that a platform you're building that developers can come in and build upon your platform? Like, how do we open up the mobile wallet that for anybody to come and build upon either your platform or some other platform to have their own wallet? And how are you thinking about that process?
So JazzCash, which is the name of our fintech service, is essentially, at this stage, a banking platform. So we can open a bank account, you can transfer funds, you can do top-ups, you can send money, get converted. The banking license does not allow us to do international remittances right now, but through Payoneer and Western Union and a few others, you can actually send up to $5,000, which will then land into a JazzCash mobile account. So all of those things that you're talking about are use cases that we do. And one of the use cases is really allowing Pakistani diaspora abroad to actually do something as basic as I've sent 10,000 rupees, just pay the electricity bill, or I will top up your mobile phone account, right? But the basic platform is very, very simple, and what we're doing over there, we're not building it ourselves. You occasionally buy some things from either Ericsson or Huawei or IBM. They develop your apps. Now I have a software factory of about 50 people, so all the other UI, UX related things we are now developing on. So the core banking platforms are through other companies. We process, just to give you an idea, close to about 5 million transactions a day. And last year we processed about 7% of Pakistan's GDP, just going over on JazzCash. So we do have the heft and the scale and the volumes that actually facilitate payments. But the bigger opportunity which is before us is how do we get these merchants, small and medium enterprises, shopkeepers, retailers, they fulfill their working capital needs. Right? So when we talk about taking Pakistan forward, one of the missing links has been why don't we have more small and medium enterprises? Capital is the missing link over there. Documentation of that capital is a problem. So that's the goal that we have now embarked upon through JazzCash as a digital bank. The consumer part is now pretty much okay. We are, we have about, again, in the context of Pakistan, a bigger number, 260,000 locations where you can actually use JazzCash by using your QR code. So we are trying to digitize payments to begin with, but on top of that comes all the banking things that you guys are already familiar with over here, like the Venmos or whatever it may be in terms of seamless peer-to-peer transfers.
Awesome. Farhan, you and
Farhan, do you have a platform or this is an app? Can other people come and build upon Jazz Bank?
Yes, so we have APIs and like they're open and then people can add this. Yeah.
So actually I have two questions, one from Zayd. Start off with evolution of Cresta. So whenever we talk about a startup, can you walk us through a little bit on the course you took to build your team? Like initially you were like 2 people, how you went from 2 to 4, how your intuition worked into the process of bringing other people in. I want to also ask a little bit about your product. So it's a product for live agents, but is it something also that works off-time hours? So like chatbots, so when there are no live agents available, is it AI powering for offline conversations as well that translates into leads down the road as well? So that's for you, and then I have one for Aamir as well.
Yeah, so to your first question, sort of building a team. So a lot of mistakes along the way in terms of building a team. I think, so there's different phases, obviously. So right now we're at the 200-person phase, which is a very different phase than when we're at 2,000. It'll be very different. And it's very different from when you're 20 or 2 people. So early on, 20 people, you're mostly hiring engineers. You want to hire people who are really believe in the mission. You need to be clear and articulate what the mission is yourself. And a lot of the hiring you're doing is through networks. So folks that you work with are friends of friends of friends, and you're hiring through that network for the first 20 people. Somewhere between the 20 to 150 phase, you start to establish your first middle management or leadership team. And that's when you start bringing in executives that have their own networks that can bring in folks in that perspective. I think the trick is once you get past this like 80, 100 person number, it becomes more and more difficult for each person to know each other. And oftentimes, basically that's where a lot of companies actually start to break down at that stage because people don't know each other. There's like this psychological number of folks that people can know. And once you cross that threshold, it becomes a support. The organization needs to have its own mechanisms to sort of communicate and create the culture. I think for us, what's worked really effectively is that the mission is strong, the mission is regularly communicated, and people believe in the mission. And so I think if you have something like that, and you have a team that's focused on that, you'll overcome a lot of other things. And so one of the things we have to do is that we have people fly out as teams of engineers from the very early days. We fly out to a contact center, and we live there for 2 or 3 days. And then you're writing code, and you're shipping code, and you see the person use the feature. And we've had like engineers in Atlanta, we went to a contact center, we shipped this feature called Smart Compose. The next morning we went to the contact center, the lady, she's this 40-year-old, she had 2 kids, but we knew a little bit about her, but when she saw the feature, she started using it, and she turned on and she asked one of our engineers, did you build this? She's like, oh my God, I love it. And it's just like that kind of visceral thing of seeing something be built and then seeing someone have that kind of visceral response. It becomes really valuable for a person because I'm going to go, time box for 20 seconds. But so Karl Marx has this thing about how people find value in their job, either if they're in service of others or they can see the joy that they bring others, right? And so those 2 types of jobs are the ones that people find like the most attachment to. So for us, often in software, when we're writing code, you're distance away from users. But if you can go visit these places and just see the visceral joy that someone has when they start to use your feature, like that for an engineer is like super, super motivating. And then ties you closer to what you're doing, the sort of the mission that you're on. And then that really sort of becomes a bedrock for a company to be built on. And you can make a lot of mistakes other than that, but if you have a strong mission, people will sort of forgive some of those mistakes and sort of stay tied to the mission there. But yeah, that's my thought. That's my thought on that piece there. Yeah.
No,
Maybe you have a question for it.
Yeah, no, that's very good. You're the second person I've heard the same thing in the last about a week. We had Invest in Pakistan, and one of our founders, charter members, has actually set up a medical device company in Pakistan. He was having issues hiring people, so he said that we take engineers to the patients because it's a dialysis machine factory, to show him the patients and sees this is what you're working on and this is what will change our people's life. And then he sees the motivation. And the engineers who come into work can actually see the value that they're going to bring to the product. So thank you for highlighting that. That's very powerful. So Aamir, from you, I want to ask is, you talked about internet banking. Does Pakistan have the backbone infrastructure in place for internet banking? Because I was recently in Pakistan, some of the basic things are being worked upon. The online account management systems, privacy issues is a big one. I've been getting somebody else's statement from Mizan Bank for the past 2 years. I've been calling them up and saying, guys, this is not my account. Nothing's been happening. But I'm looking at
Should they use Cresta?
Sorry?
Maybe they should use Cresta.
But do we have that infrastructure? And then where do you see this evolution going, right? Is the country ready for an online account, or is just a certain percentage that will benefit from it?
So infrastructure build-up is an ongoing process. Will we have the infrastructure before the need comes, or the need infrastructure? I don't think the infrastructure is poor or bad to begin with, right? Everybody, there are about 90-odd million people with smartphones. That's all the infrastructure that you need. There are in a connectivity thing. Okay, the connectivity could be better, it could be more robust, etc., etc. But those elements are there. Then comes the educational thing, then comes the confidence thing that I can deal on the phone with money. I don't necessarily have to. So those, and there is going to be engineered fraud. They're going to be all, whenever you come up with these things, you talk about privacy, that seems like that. Genuine mistakes, somebody else's email coming to you because of bad data entry, etc., etc. So that should be fixed. But I think it's an evolutionary thing. I'm not perturbed or worried that we can't do it. The need is certainly there, right? What is it that customers need? They need access to instruments that provide them financial well-being. Whether that is the ability to pay, which is something that we do every single day almost. We make a payment one way or the other. That payment can be digitized. If you think about it and zoom out, from a country's perspective, the more digital payments we have, the more digital fingerprints we have on that transaction. So cash is not being transacted. You actually have the knowledge of where the transaction originated, where it ended, from AML perspective, from counter-financing of terrorism perspective, all those things that you've been hearing about, FATF and all those things, ending of corruption in countries like Pakistan. Digital currency is an absolute necessity. And I think more and more people are becoming familiar with it, both the lawmakers as well as companies which are entering this space. So answering your first question, yes, the infrastructure is not poor, it is not bad, it is quite okay. We just need that thinking and evolution, and we have to be prepared that there will be missteps, there will be some data breaches, there will be bad people who will try to steal data. There's a lot of engineered fraud on Jazz Cash, and ultimately it comes down to even relatively educated people like my own mother, who receives a call and says, well, I'm so-and-so, can you please give me your PIN? And I'm calling from Jazz, give me your PIN. And she gives the PIN, and you're like, somebody takes money. But that's basically naivety at the end user's space. So we have to create that education also. Country is ready, people are ready, but they are naive in certain ways, and they're going to be miscreants who are going to abuse this thing. But there is no denial that this is something that we need, that this is something that we're going to push for.
Talk about something over these days. I'm joking. I respect all my competitors. So are we conversational AI? So conversational AI historically has been sort of used as a bot or these kinds of chatbot type things. Our approach on this problem is actually we believe that that's too niche and segmented. So there's a lot of bot frameworks that you mentioned, bot companies that you mentioned. What's happening in this space is that folks are going in blind and they're building these bots without understanding customer conversations. And quite frankly, like the average satisfaction for these bots is not great. And that's because they're sort of looking at this as a sort of a niche or siloed part of the problem. Our approach is, what we do is we started with this agent assist part of the agent-facing AI part of the problem, because that's the most complex parts of these conversations. And when you're in the agent and you're helping the agent have these conversations, you're learning as well through those interactions what kind of conversations are happening and what's effective to automate and put into a bot. So we're able to deliver these kinds of insights in terms of these are particular conversations and this is the ideal way to have those conversations. And these can be automated by a bot, and these should be automated by a human, or they should be handled by a human. And so that holistic picture of looking at it from the agent-facing side of it, and then moving to a bot, ultimately then creates much better experiences. So we have a bot, Farhan also had that question, we have a bot offering. And the way we approach that problem is we start with the agent-facing side of it, build the best possible conversations with agents, and then identify what parts of it should be a bot, versus sort of approaching it directly as a bot, and then building substandard experiences in that space. And so that's our sort of approach to that problem.
We will find alternative ways. The revenue is actually determined by the size of the screen, because the bigger the screen is, the more you will be able to do with it. If you have a traditional feature phone, which pretty much 50% of Pakistani population still uses that, so there are limited things that you can do because there's no screen, there is less productivity, there is less engagement. Most of the telcos now around the world look at engagement. How relevant are you? Are you just a dumb-bit pipe on which people prefer their social media platforms which belong to somebody else? Where we are trying to now increase our revenue from is creating alternatives or at least options for customers to spend time with us. And I talked about Tamasha, which is a video app. So the longer they spend their time with us, the greater is the likelihood that they will continue their subscription or their top-ups with us. That's the way that we move it. It's very difficult to raise tariffs, even though we are in an inflationary environment around the world. But typically the tariffs in telecoms have continued to come down. And many places don't even charge for voice anymore, it's just your data packages. So for a company like us, our ambition is to create more alternatives or options in terms of app environment where the customer is engaged with us for greater number of minutes every single day. That's how we try to boost our revenue.
Okay, last question, because I'm just looking at the, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Salman. I'm a student here at Stanford and Edison also.
Okay.
So my question is for Zayd. Could you tell me, is today's Cresta the same Cresta you envisioned it to be when you founded it? To what extent has your vision evolved?
Yeah, so the high-level mission has always been the same, which is how is artificial intelligence a technology that can enhance human productivity? And when you have a high-level vision like that, or a high-level mission like that, can you enable people to be 100 times more productive? You got to figure out where to start, right? So that has changed. Even during the PhD, I originally was building this kind of technology for email. So built a software that sort of would respond to folks' email and help them respond to it. Ultimately, Google launched a product in that space, and the day Google launched it, like 20 people sent me the article of Google launching this product, which made me realize that I probably shouldn't. It's just hard to compete against Google's data advantage. The thing is, for any kind of high-level mission, you need to figure out a wedge in. And so then ultimately, I started working with companies, and in the Bay Area, I sort of would go in and observe people working and build small tools that would be assistants that would help them in the course of their day-to-day work. And the wedge I found in was chat. So we built these kind of software that for chat support and sales agents, it's making these recommendations and completing their sentences. That got us got us off the ground and got us into business, but ultimately chat is a much smaller market than voice, and then once we expanded to voice, that's when the business really took off. But sort of has been this progression across different channels. Then you always have to figure out how do you get in, what's your wedge in, and like what's that niche small enough market to get in, and then you sort of expand from there. But ultimately the mission shouldn't change, the high level goal from the company shouldn't change.
Awesome. Final question. I saw you raising hands. Yeah, please go ahead. Please.
I actually am a focus photographer, but I had to represent women and ask questions specifically to both of you.
Yes.
So, first question to you. Oh, thank you. First question to you on data. We talked about AI and machine learning. I recently actually took a course at UC Berkeley for data science, AI, and machine learning. I learned that, I'm going to play devil's advocate. You can manipulate data. How do you control ethical values in collecting data and presenting it correctly so that at the end the customers are not manipulating for valuations? That's my question. And you actually did talk about another part about working with a female who was 40 and the impact that your engineer had on her by teaching her. Do you see value in teaching and enhancing the women and workforce in Pakistan, particularly because you guys both are talking about 50% with half of the population. We do have women in Pakistan. What do you envision for women if you can bring more women on board using your product? Second question for Mr. Aamir for Jazz. You talked about your mom having difficulty with the manipulation of colors and data security. Again, going back to women in Pakistan, there are more women using technology for their day-to-day work and communication. How do you envision getting them on board? What are the tools you're using to get more women on both ends as consumers? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. It's an important question. So you have two questions, one on data manipulation and the second on empowerment of females. Data manipulation, if people, it's a problem. It's fundamentally, I think anything can be, you could write bad software. You could manipulate, you could have software that just does bad things, or you could have, you could build circuits and these hardware, these kinds of things that do bad things, or weapons that do bad things. And the same thing applies to data and AI. And so the principles that you use to build and develop that technology is really fundamental and important. Our goal always has been is that empowerment of the individual, empowerment of the team. And AI can be a force for humanity and ultimately help people be more productive. Those are our guiding principles in terms of how we build the technology. And quite frankly, we think I personally am so much more motivated every single day to work on this than sort of figure out how to get people to engage more on the social media feed, or how to get sort of more people to sort of click on Instagram likes. I mean, that's a really big use of AI in the world right now. But for me, it's not motivating to wake up and work on those kinds of problems versus work on problems that are about empowerment of people to just help them do their jobs better. So I think it has to go back to the principles that you're using to advance technology, which is an important question. On the second topic, empowerment of women in Pakistan, I think that's a really, really big and important thing. I think culturally we're set back a little bit, but that's not there's so many brilliant and bright and so much opportunity and energy and sort of potential there. I think oftentimes the conversation in Silicon Valley has progressed significantly in terms of these kinds of topics, and the conversation globally has progressed significantly in terms of these topics. We're really excited about the fact that we're starting to see more and more people that are choosing careers in computer science. Like I'm seeing a lot more younger people choosing these kinds of careers in computer science, and we recently had a batch of interns that sort of interned, like middle school, high school, from the subcontinent that interned at Cresta for a month and sort of just saw what that was looking like. Women in computer science that were exploring that as a career. And I was just really excited to see their passion and energy as part of it. Hopefully they'll choose to continue down their career of computer science. But I think it's a very important topic and something that if we just keep giving focus on, it's going to happen.
So how are we doing and what are we doing for women specifically? Right? So the core of what we want to do at Jazz, and I've memorized this because I strongly believe in it, is how do we use technology to help improve the lives and livelihoods of women, right? Using technology, right? And technology is a great equalizer, right? We cannot succeed as a country if 50% of our workforce is marginalized, not given the opportunities. So that's something that we're working on, not just within our own organization, because that's a relatively smaller footprint. So we've got about maybe 4,500 employees. I can certainly make it a better place, which I intend, which we're doing in any case, right? But that's going to affect 4,000 people. How do we use technology for the greater good? Smartphone ownership, there's a huge difference between men and women in Pakistan. Again, cultural biases, बच्चे को देना कोई मसला नहीं है, बेटी को दे दिया मसला खड़ा हो जाएगा, those kind of barriers. Financial barriers also. women do not have the opportunity to have a property registered in their name in Pakistan. Right? It's much lower. Starting businesses. These are the things that we are now working on. I'm part of Champions of Change Coalition, where we are bringing this kind of a change to all the workforces in Pakistan. Having female champions within our organization, my leadership team has 3 out of 9 people. My direct reports are women. So we're trying to create basically visible successes for women, and for them to basically bring on more, both in technology and elsewhere. It has been a struggle. But I think when we talk, and I briefly mentioned that we used phones and technology for about 80 odd schools, girls' schools in Pakistan, and how do we create immersive technology learning. I'm also part of Ignite, which is a board, and again, the focus of that has been around creating digital skills. And this is something that even in the context of Pakistan, if you've got certain of the cultural biases, if we allow women or if we teach or enable women to code, they can actually continue to earn a livelihood even if they have to respect their cultural limitations, which take a whole lot longer. So a number of things that we're doing, I didn't want to enumerate all of them, but this is something that is really the heart of our social responsibility that we do at JAS.